What if your memories could be stolen while you slept? The thought never crossed Claire's mind as she turned the key in the old brass lock of the Maplewood house. From the outside, it looked charming, classic Victorian architecture, ivy crawling up the faded brick, and windows glinting softly in the late afternoon sun. But something about the air made her pause. It was heavier here, almost viscous, as though it clung to your skin and seeped into your lungs. The moving van had long departed, leaving the family of three alone in the hushed silence. Claire ran her hand along the dusty banister as she climbed the stairs, her fingers brushing against years of neglect. Behind her, her husband Mark followed, carrying their youngest, Jamie, who seemed unusually quiet for a 7-year-old who had just been loaded with toys, blankets, and a new bedroom all in one day. "Feels different here, doesn't it?" Claire asked softly, trying to shake off the unease crawling up her spine. Mark laughed lightly, but it lacked warmth. "Old houses always do. Don't let it get to you. We've got the whole place to ourselves now." They made their way to the master bedroom on the second floor, where sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, scattering rainbow fragments across the floorboards. Claire felt drawn to the pattern of light, hypnotized for a moment, and almost didn't notice the subtle chill that seeped from the walls. That night, after unpacking a few boxes, they all went to bed. The house was unusually quiet, no creaks, no groans of settling wood, just an eerie stillness. Jamie slept soundly between them, his small chest rising and falling in rhythmic peace. But as Claire drifted into slumber, the air in the room shifted. She dreamed, but not of familiar memories. The dream began in their living room, though the walls were darker, elongated, as if the space itself had stretched unnaturally. Shadows moved against her will, creeping closer with deliberate intent. She reached for Mark's hand, but he wasn't there. She turned, and Jamie's face appeared, but it wasn't his face. His eyes were hollow, reflecting something old and knowing, and the moment she tried to scream, she woke. Claire sat upright, drenched in sweat, heart hammering. Mark stirred beside her, rubbing his eyes. "You okay?" he murmured. "Just a nightmare," she whispered. But it felt real. Too real. Mark reached for her, but she noticed his hand trembled slightly. He didn't say anything else, and the room fell back into silence. The chill lingered. Over the next few days, the family began noticing small changes. Claire misplaced familiar items, her wedding ring, the recipe book she swore she had left on the counter. Mark forgot appointments and details of conversations he was certain he had remembered. Jamie began talking about friends he didn't know, games he claimed to play at school that didn't exist. And always, in the quiet moments before sleep, there was a sensation that someone, or something, was watching them, waiting. One night, Claire awoke again, and this time it wasn't a dream she was leaving behind, it was a memory. She couldn't remember the name of their first pet. Mark's face, once sharp and clear in her mind, seemed slightly blurred, edges fraying as if reality itself was deteriorating. Her panic rose, clawing at her throat. Mark stirred. "Claire," he asked. I can't. I don't remember," she said, her voice shaking. He frowned, confusion etching deep lines into his forehead. "What do you mean?" "I can't remember important things. Our apartment in the city, the road trip to the mountains. Jamie's first day of school. It's like, it's all gone." Mark sat up abruptly, pulling her close. "It's just stress," he said firmly, though his own worry crept into his voice. "We're moving. That's all. Stress makes your mind play tricks." But Claire wasn't convinced. She couldn't shake the sensation that the house had done this, somehow. That it had reached into her mind while she slept, taking the intimate details of her life and replacing them with shadows, voids, and blank spaces where memories should be. The next morning, Jamie was gone. Claire awoke to the sunlight streaming in, Mark already gone to work, and their son nowhere in sight. She called for him, her voice shaking. No response. She ran through the house, checking every room. And then she noticed it, the faint, almost imperceptible whispers coming from the walls. They were soft at first, like leaves rustling in the wind, but when she strained to listen, they began to form words. Her own name. Jamie's name. Mom. Mommy. Claire spun, heart hammering. The voice came from the walls, yet somehow from nowhere at all. She reached toward the sound, and the floor beneath her shifted subtly, as if responding to her touch. A door that had never been there before appeared at the end of the hall, a door made of dark oak, smooth, featureless, and humming with a low vibration that resonated through her bones. She hesitated. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, to leave the house and never return. But something deeper, primal, rooted her in place. The whispers became clearer, desperate, pleading. Mom, help me. Claire took a step forward. Then another. Her hand rested against the door. It was cold, unnaturally cold, but solid. The whispers grew frantic. She realized with a growing sense of dread that this house didn't just erase memories, it collected them. It devoured them while the family slept, storing fragments of their lives in some twisted repository hidden behind walls and floors. And now it wanted something more. With a trembling hand, she turned the doorknob. The door opened into darkness deeper than night itself. The whispers intensified, overlapping into a cacophony of voices, her own memories calling out to her, and Jamie's voice crying for rescue. As her eyes adjusted, she saw faint shapes moving in the gloom, furniture she recognized from her past apartment, snapshots from their childhood, all distorted and hanging in midair, floating like fragments in some hellish limbo. And then she heard it. A soft, deliberate click. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, indistinct, its face hidden behind shifting darkness. It stepped closer, and Claire could feel the weight of the stolen memories pressing against her mind, dragging her forward, whispering that she belonged here, that she was now part of the house's collection. Claire's scream caught in her throat as the figure extended a hand, and the floating fragments of her past began to orbit around it, drawn in as if by invisible strings. She reached out to the last fragment she recognized, Jamie's face, frozen mid-laugh, and just as she was about to grasp it, the figure moved faster, and it vanished, dragged deeper into the void beyond the door. The hallway fell silent. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving her alone in the pitch darkness, her heart hammering, every ounce of her being screaming to run, yet unable to move. And somewhere in the depths of the house, Jamie's voice whispered again, soft and distant. Mom, don't forget me. Claire's breathing echoed in the oppressive darkness as she pressed herself against the cold walls of the void, every instinct screaming that the house had more tricks than she could imagine. The fragments of her past, small shards of photographs, half-remembered conversations, childhood toys, floated around her like ghosts, tugging at her mind. Every step she took seemed heavier, as though the house itself was weighing her down, forcing her to remember everything she had forgotten, yet letting her grasp nothing fully. The whispers persisted, growing louder, overlapping into a maddening chorus. Jamie's voice rose above the others, insistent but faint, as if he were on the other side of a long tunnel. Mom. Mommy, help me. Each cry twisted Claire's gut, filling her with a desperate urgency she couldn't ignore. She spun, searching for the source, but the void shifted with every glance. Hallways that had appeared moments before twisted into staircases that led nowhere. Doorways disappeared when approached, only to reappear behind her in impossible patterns. Claire stumbled forward, reaching out to the first fragment she could recognize, a small, worn toy car that Jamie had carried everywhere. The moment her fingers grazed it, a cold, pulsing energy surged up her arm, and she was slammed with memories she didn't know she still had. Jamie's first steps, his laughter ringing through their apartment, bedtime stories she had nearly forgotten. She gasped, overwhelmed, and the fragment wavered in her hand, slipping back into the void. The whispers changed then, no longer just faint echoes. They became voices speaking directly into her mind, echoing her own thoughts in distorted, mocking tones. "You can't save him. You've already forgotten too much." Claire shook her head violently, tears blurring her vision. "No. I won't forget him. I won't let this house win." From the shadows, a faint glow appeared. It wasn't the greenish light of the grandfather clock she had seen in the main hall. It was warmer, softer, pulsing like a heartbeat. Claire instinctively moved toward it, her steps hesitant, each footfall swallowed by the thick darkness. As she drew closer, she realized the glow emanated from a doorway that hadn't been there before. This door wasn't solid, it shimmered, as if it were a membrane separating two worlds. Beyond it, she could make out shapes of familiar rooms, distorted and warped. It looked like her home, but wrong, twisted by years of forgotten memories and stolen moments. She stepped through, and the world shifted around her. She found herself in a version of their living room, but the walls were taller, the colors muted and cold. Furniture floated slightly above the ground, tethered to invisible strings, while whispers swirled in the air like living fog. Claire felt a chill crawl down her spine, her eyes darting to a shadow moving in the corner. It wasn't Jamie, not yet, but something that had once resembled him. The figure paused, indistinct, like a memory that hadn't fully formed. "Mom," the figure whispered, fading in and out of existence. Claire rushed forward, heart pounding, but as she reached for it, the shadow dissolved into a swirl of black mist. A voice, older, darker, and more commanding than any she had heard before, spoke from the void, "You cannot take them back. The house remembers what you forget, and forgets what you cling to." Claire froze, terror tightening around her like iron bands. She realized then that the house wasn't just stealing memories, it was consuming them, feeding on her attachment to them. It manipulated reality, turning her memories into traps, keeping fragments of her life hostage in exchange for her sanity. Every attempt to reclaim them risked losing herself further. She sank to the floor, fighting back panic, trying to remember what was real and what wasn't. Her fingers brushed a floating photograph, and the warmth of familiarity surged through her. It was a picture of Jamie blowing out candles on his last birthday. But before she could hold on to it, the photograph snapped out of her grasp and spiraled into the darkness. She screamed, the sound swallowed immediately by the void, leaving her isolated with the whispers and her racing heartbeat. The shadow shifted closer, now taking a more solid form, a tall, humanoid shape with no discernible face, composed entirely of fractured memories. Claire could see snippets of her life reflected in it, Mark's laugh, Jamie's small hands, her own eyes in childhood. The figure moved unnervingly, and every step it took seemed to erase parts of the floor beneath her. What are you?" Claire demanded, her voice cracking. "What do you want from my family?" The figure tilted its head, and the whispers became voices she knew, neighbors, friends, even strangers, calling her name, pleading with her to let go, to surrender. "We are the house," the voice intoned, low and resonant. "We are the memories you cannot hold. Every forgotten laugh, every stolen moment, we are them. And now, your son belongs to us." Claire's stomach churned. No, not Jamie." Desperation surged through her, sharpening her senses. She looked around the distorted living room and noticed something odd. The walls, while warped, formed patterns, lines connecting certain objects, almost like a map. Could this be the house's mechanism? A pattern to follow? She didn't know, but it was a thread, a potential lifeline. Clutching the fragments she could salvage, pieces of her life, her memories, she rose to her feet. Each step she took was mirrored by the shadows around her, attempting to confuse, distract, and erase. The whispers roared louder, voices overlapping, jumbled, chaotic. Yet through the cacophony, she heard Jamie's voice again, clearer than before, "Mom, follow the light." Claire's eyes darted to the soft glow from a hallway she hadn't noticed before, and instinct propelled her forward. The house seemed to shift as she moved, corridors stretching impossibly, ceilings rising and falling. Every fragment of her memories she touched surged with energy, illuminating the path like breadcrumbs, leading her deeper into the house. She turned a corner, and there he was, Jamie, suspended in the air, caught in a sphere of shimmering darkness, eyes wide and terrified. Before she could run to him, the shadow stretched its limbs, forming walls around him, making the sphere pulse like a heartbeat. "Mom, hurry!" Jamie cried, and the urgency in his voice fueled Claire's resolve. She took a deep breath, clenched her fists, and stepped forward, ready to face whatever the house would throw at her next. But before she could reach him, the shadows converged, and the hallway twisted violently, disorienting her. She fell to the floor, and the last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her vision was the faint, unblinking outline of her own memories, floating just out of reach. Claire's hands scraped against the cold, warped floorboards as the darkness pressed in from all sides, tendrils of shadow wrapping around her like living chains. Her vision flickered with fragments of her own past, her mother's laughter, Jamie's first steps, Mark's smile, all flashing briefly before being swallowed by the shifting void. Every memory stolen left her mind raw, disoriented, and aching with a desperation that threatened to overwhelm her entirely. But she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. Jamie's terrified voice echoed somewhere ahead, sharp and clear, cutting through the twisted whispers like a lifeline. Crawling forward, Claire noticed the hallway itself had changed. What moments before seemed solid now pulsed and flexed as though the walls were alive, breathing, responsive to her fear. Every step triggered the shadows to twist and lurch toward her, reaching with long, distorted limbs that seemed to swipe at her very mind. When she ducked beneath one, she felt her memories of her childhood fade slightly, leaving her with nothing but the urgent need to save her son. The house was not merely a building, it was a predator, sentient and hungry, feeding on the very essence of those who dared enter. The sphere of darkness holding Jamie hovered near the end of the corridor, flickering like an unsteady flame. He banged his small fists against its invisible walls, eyes wide, frozen in a silent plea that pierced Claire's soul. She wanted to reach out, to tear the sphere apart, but as she moved forward, the shadows responded violently. One of them lunged, not physically, but mentally, snapping into her mind with icy force, pulling at her memories, forcing images of things she loved and feared to flood her consciousness in jarring, chaotic flashes. Claire screamed, staggering, and the sphere shivered in response, Jamie's form twitching unnaturally. Somewhere in the distance, the low, sonorous voice of the house resonated through the corridors, omnipresent yet impossible to locate. "You cannot save him. All who enter give themselves to us. All memories belong to us." The words weren't just spoken, they clawed at her skull, vibrating in her bones and threatening to unravel her very identity. Claire clenched her jaw and forced herself to focus, trying to remember what she had read somewhere about resisting fear, about fighting psychic intrusions. This house thrives on our memories, yes, but memory itself is strength. If I can anchor myself, if I can fight, I might be able to save him. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she gritted her teeth and grasped a fragment floating nearby, a small, chipped teacup from her own childhood. The warmth of familiarity surged through her as she held it tightly. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing, as though the fragment reminded them that she still possessed something beyond their reach. Steeling herself, Claire rose and sprinted, weaving through the shifting hallway. The floor seemed to ripple beneath her feet, walls bending and stretching like liquid, yet the sphere of darkness remained ahead, faintly illuminated by the dim green glow seeping from cracks in the warped ceiling. The house tried to confuse her, pulling in fragments of other memories, Jamie's laughter from a day at the park, Mark reading a bedtime story, Claire herself laughing in the rain during a forgotten road trip. Each vision almost made her stumble, made her hesitate, but she forced herself onward. The shadows began to writhe more violently, forming grotesque shapes that mimicked her family, their faces twisted and hollow, mouths opening in silent screams. One reached for her, and she felt her memories of Jamie's earliest days, the way he had clutched her finger as a baby, beginning to unravel. Panic clawed at her throat, but she refused to succumb. I remember everything that matters, she shouted, gripping the teacup tightly like a lifeline. The hollow faces froze momentarily, recoiling as though wounded, and Claire surged forward with renewed determination. Finally, she reached the sphere. It pulsed, radiating a cold, suffocating energy, and she realized the horrifying truth. The house didn't just steal memories, it stored them, manipulated them, and could manifest them as physical obstacles. The shadows, the warped corridors, even the sphere itself were extensions of what the house had taken. Every attempt to reach Jamie would provoke a reaction, erasing more of her past. But she had no choice. Claire took a deep breath, centering herself on the core memory that mattered most, the day she had promised Jamie that she would always protect him, no matter what. She poured all of her love, all of her recollection of him into that memory, letting it shine outward like a beacon. The sphere shivered violently, the shadows thrashing in response. Claire reached out with both hands, summoning every fragment she could anchor to herself, and plunged them into the center of the dark orb. The house roared, a deafening, bone-shaking sound that reverberated through her very being. The sphere wobbled, its edges fraying, and Jamie's form flickered violently. Claire's vision blurred as she was thrown backward, hitting the floor hard, but her hands never let go. She could feel the house fighting, clawing, twisting, trying to pull her memories, and Jamie, into the void. Her vision swam with fragmented images, the family's old apartment, past birthdays, forgotten vacations, half-remembered lullabies, all spinning around her in a dizzying cyclone. Then, suddenly, silence. Claire's chest heaved, and she blinked, adjusting to the dim green light of the hallway. The sphere was gone. Jamie was on the floor in front of her, coughing and shivering, eyes wide but real, solid. Claire scooped him into her arms, holding him close, tears streaming down her face. She thought it was over. She thought she had won. But the house wasn't done. Not yet. Claire held Jamie tightly as she forced herself to move forward, her footsteps echoing strangely in the warped hallways. The house had grown impossibly larger, or perhaps it always had been, stretching beyond the laws of space and time. Every corner seemed to ripple like water disturbed by a stone, shadows crawling along the walls as if they were alive. Jamie clung to her arm, his small body trembling, but when he looked up at her, she saw the same determination mirrored in his eyes. They had survived the first trial, but Claire knew instinctively that the house would not stop. It was patient, eternal, and it had all the time in the world. As they moved, Claire's attention was drawn to subtle markings on the walls, scratches and carvings she had not noticed before. They weren't random, they formed patterns, almost like a code or a map. Some were simple lines, others intricate symbols that seemed to pulse faintly when she stared at them. She traced her fingers along one of the carvings, feeling a cold vibration beneath her touch, and suddenly a memory flashed, not hers, but someone else's. A man, centuries ago, trapped in the same corridors, carving warnings into the walls before disappearing forever. Claire gasped and pulled back, her mind reeling. The house preserved memories in 1,000 ways, some as fragments she could grasp, others as warnings left by those who had come before and failed. Jamie tugged at her hand, breaking her from the reverie. "Mom, look." He pointed toward a narrow door that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. It was old, made of cracked oak, and unlike the other doors, it didn't ripple or shimmer. Its surface was solid, almost inviting. Claire approached cautiously, her instincts torn between hope and fear. She placed her hand on the handle, and the low murmur of whispers intensified. They weren't random this time, they were coherent, pleading, desperate. "Do not enter. Leave now. It will take more than memories this time." Ignoring the warnings, Claire turned the knob. The door creaked open to reveal a library unlike any she had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stretched impossibly high, filled with dusty tomes, each one pulsing faintly as if alive. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and something else, something metallic, like iron mixed with dust. As she stepped inside, the whispers transformed into murmurs of recognition. She realized with horror that each book contained the memories of someone who had entered this house before her. Some books glowed faintly, indicating incomplete or stolen memories. Others were bound in black leather, sealed shut as if the knowledge inside was too dangerous to release. Her fingers brushed against one of the books, and a vision struck her suddenly, a young couple, decades ago, wandering the same hallways, laughing and screaming in alternating moments of terror. The book vibrated violently in her hands, pulling her consciousness into the memory. She saw the man clutching his wife's hand as shadows wrapped around them, consuming their pasts, and then, nothing. Claire staggered back, gasping for air. She realized the terrible truth: the house didn't just steal memories, it archived them, keeping the essence of every soul trapped within its walls. Jamie whimpered beside her. "Mom, we need to find Daddy." The words struck her like a knife. Mark had been missing since the first night, and she had been so consumed with rescuing Jamie that she hadn't fully processed it. Every instinct screamed that he, too, was somewhere inside the house, another fragment waiting to be retrieved, or consumed. Determined, Claire began to examine the books more closely, looking for anything that might reveal a pattern, a clue. One tome, larger than the others, caught her attention. Its spine was cracked, and the cover bore a symbol she recognized, the same faint markings she had seen on the walls. She opened it carefully, and as she did, a wave of images hit her. The house had a history, stretching back centuries, each occupant leaving traces of themselves behind. Families, couples, children, they all came seeking shelter or refuge, only to be absorbed into the house's growing collection of memories. And at the center of it all, she saw a figure, a man with hollow eyes, whispering promises to a young family as the walls of the house reshaped around them. Claire's stomach churned as she pieced together the implication. The house wasn't just alive, it was sentient, feeding on what people held most dear. It drew strength from the attachments, the love, the grief. Memories weren't just sustenance, they were fuel for its endless, twisting corridors and impossible architecture. And the clocks she had glimpsed before, the faint ticking, the synchronized stops and starts, were its heartbeat, marking the rhythm of its feeding, the pace at which it rewrote reality for anyone trapped inside. Jamie tugged at her sleeve again, pointing toward a narrow staircase spiraling downward at the far end of the library. "Mom, I think he's down there." Claire swallowed, nodding. "We'll get him. I promise." The descent was terrifying. The staircase seemed to stretch endlessly, and with each step, memories she hadn't realized were important began to drift away, slipping through her grasp. Yet she forced herself to focus, clutching Jamie close and repeating silently the memories she refused to forget, his first words, his small hand in hers, the warmth of his embrace. Each recollection was a shield, pushing back the encroaching darkness. At the bottom, they emerged into a vast, circular chamber. The air was colder here, thick with a sense of dread that pressed on her chest like a physical weight. Shadows moved independently, coalescing into vague humanoid forms. And at the center of the room, suspended in a vortex of memory fragments, was Mark. His eyes were open, wide with terror, but he didn't move. Around him, the fragments of their lives, wedding photos, old toys, even moments Claire didn't consciously remember, swirled violently, as if arguing over who would remain and who would be consumed. Claire's heart nearly stopped. She took a tentative step forward, and the shadows reacted immediately, twisting into elongated forms that lashed at her, whispering threats, mocking her resolve. She clutched Jamie's hand and pressed forward, her voice rising in determination. "I won't let you take him. Not this time." The shadows recoiled, shrieking in distorted echoes, but the house retaliated. The chamber bent impossibly, the floor rippling beneath them, and the ceiling above stretched into a dark, spinning vortex. Claire realized with chilling clarity, the house was adapting, learning from her. Her love, her memories, were weapons, and it intended to break her before she could use them fully. Claire took a deep breath, centering herself. She began to hum, a song she and Mark had sung to Jamie countless times, a melody she could still remember perfectly. The house hissed in response, and the fragments of memory spun faster, but instead of breaking her, the song created resonance, a tether linking her, Jamie, and Mark together. Slowly, the swirling fragments began to align, forming a path through the darkness. Claire took a careful step forward, holding onto the tether with everything she had, reaching toward Mark. But just as her fingers grazed his, the house shifted violently, and the vortex intensified. A whisper, darker than all the rest, filled the chamber. "You cannot leave with them. They are ours now." Claire's scream echoed through the chamber as the floor began to give way beneath them, and the vortex expanded, pulling at their very beings. She knew then that this battle was far from over. The house had revealed part of its power and history, but the fight for their lives, the fight to reclaim their stolen memories, was only beginning. Claire's pulse pounded in her ears as she held Jamie tightly, the tether of memory connecting them to Mark glowing faintly in the swirling vortex. The house was alive in ways that defied reason, bending space, warping time, and twisting memories into obstacles. Every fragment of their past, every cherished moment, was now a weapon turned against them. The shadows writhed at the edges of the chamber, whispering threats and impossibilities, and the vortex pulled relentlessly at their senses. Claire realized that brute force alone would not free them. She needed strategy, understanding, and control over the one thing the house craved most, their memories. Clutching Jamie's hand, Claire forced herself to focus. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering on the one memory that had never failed her, the first night she had held Jamie in her arms. She could feel his warmth, the soft rhythm of his breathing, the weight of his small body pressing against her chest. That anchor, pure and untainted, was something the house could not consume. With deliberate intent, she pushed that memory outward, letting it radiate like a beacon through the chamber. The swirling fragments of other memories wavered, then aligned, forming a narrow, shimmering path through the vortex toward Mark. But the house resisted. The shadows surged forward, dark and fluid, trying to sever the tether, attempting to scatter her focus. Claire stumbled but refused to let go, repeating the anchor memory silently, over and over, until the path solidified beneath their feet. Each step forward was a battle. The house shifted corridors, twisted ceilings, and warped the floor beneath them, but Claire pressed onward, knowing that hesitation could mean permanent loss. Finally, they reached Mark. His eyes were wide, reflecting fear and confusion, but the moment he felt Claire's hand on his arm, a flicker of recognition sparked within him. "Claire." "Jamie," his voice was weak, but it carried the gravity of relief. The vortex around them pulsed violently as if sensing the attempt to reclaim what it had taken. The shadows writhed more aggressively, forming grotesque facsimiles of their family members, past friends, and even pets, everything Claire had ever loved, now distorted into monstrous obstacles meant to break her resolve. "Mark, focus. Remember who we are. Remember us," Claire shouted, gripping his hands. Slowly, his own memories, scattered and dulled by the house, began to resurface, tethered to her unwavering determination. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing as the three of them formed a unified front, their combined recollections strengthening the tether that anchored them to reality. The vortex, however, was far from defeated. Time itself seemed to resist them. Clocks in the chamber spun backward, unwinding moments from their lives, while visions of alternate realities flickered across their vision, lives they had never lived, choices they had never made, entire timelines erased and rewritten in a blur of chaos. Claire realized that the house didn't just feed on memories, it experimented with them, testing the boundaries of identity and attachment. It wanted not only to consume their past but to fragment their sense of self completely. Desperation fueled her next move. Claire scanned the chamber for anything that could offer insight into the house's origin, a weakness, or even a pattern to its actions. Among the floating fragments, she noticed a series of old letters, yellowed with age, fluttering aimlessly in the vortex. One letter, slightly glowing, caught her attention. She snatched it from the air, breaking the swirling flow of fragments momentarily. The ink on the page seemed to shift, forming words directly into her mind. The house collects what you cherish, stores what you fear, and reshapes reality from the remnants. Only by confronting the source can one reclaim what is lost. Her stomach churned at the implication. The house had a source, a core, something anchoring its power. Everything, the shifting corridors, the shadows, the vortex, emanated from that source. If she could reach it, perhaps she could undo the theft of their memories and break the house's hold. But she had no idea where to begin. The letters didn't specify, only warned that the source would test her in ways she could not yet comprehend. Jamie, sensing the tension, clung to her, whispering, "Mom, it's scary." His small voice pierced the chaotic noise, grounding her. She hugged him tightly, realizing that their shared memories, their bonds, were both their shield and their weapon. Claire began to formulate a plan. They would move together, step by step, using the fragments they could salvage as markers and anchors, following the faint glow of objects and memories that seemed connected to the house's heartbeat. As they advanced through the twisting chamber, the shadows grew more aggressive, forming walls of black that blocked their path, clawing at their minds. Claire realized that fighting head-on would be futile. Instead, she began to manipulate the fragments, selecting memories to project outward as light, creating pathways through the darkness. Each fragment she used weakened the shadows briefly, but she had to be careful. Too many memories spent carelessly, and she would lose pieces of herself, potentially never reclaiming them. Hours, or perhaps minutes, time was meaningless in the house, passed as they navigated the labyrinthine chamber. Every turn brought visions of people who had come before them, trapped eternally in the house's memory vortex. Some reached out silently, warning, begging, or pleading. Claire averted her gaze, focusing instead on her immediate goal. The letters had made it clear, confronting the source was the only way to reclaim what the house had taken. Finally, a doorway appeared, larger and more solid than any they had encountered. The glow emanating from it pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, an unnatural, oppressive rhythm that resonated through the chamber and in Claire's own chest. She recognized instinctively that this must be the source. The shadows retreated slightly, as if the house itself acknowledged the threshold. Claire took a deep breath and whispered to Jamie and Mark, "Stay close. We face this together. Whatever happens next, we hold on to each other." Their hands clasped tightly, forming a chain of determination. With one final step, they crossed the threshold, and the world around them warped violently, the shadows screaming, the vortex spinning faster, until everything dissolved into blinding white light. The white light receded slowly, leaving Claire blinking against an unnatural brightness that seemed to exist in no particular space. The chamber around them had changed. Walls and floors no longer had solid form, they were fluid, shifting, alive with colors that made no sense, deep purples flowing into molten golds, black shadows stretching like ink across a surface that had no surface. It was both disorienting and horrifying, as if they were standing inside the house's mind. Every step they took caused ripples, echoes of memory fragments floating like stars in the air, illuminating pieces of lives long past and painfully close. Jamie clung to Claire, trembling, and Mark's eyes darted around frantically, trying to anchor himself to some fragment of reality. Claire realized instantly that this was no ordinary room, it was the very core of the house, the place where memories converged and the house's consciousness manifested. She could feel it, something vast, intelligent, and malevolent. It was aware of them, studying them, probing the strength of their bonds, and calculating the perfect way to consume them entirely. A low, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through their bones, a sound that was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. And then the voice spoke, not through the ears, but through their minds. You come seeking what you have lost. You believe your love is strong enough to defy me. But all who enter are fragments waiting to be consumed. Claire's heart raced, but she forced herself to respond, mentally projecting strength, even as fear clawed at her. We are whole together. You may take fragments, distort memories, but you will never break us. The voice laughed, echoing in the chamber like 1,000 overlapping tones. You misunderstand. I am not here to break you. I am here to collect. To preserve. To shape reality from the remnants of what you cherish most. Your memories are nourishment, yes, but also clay for my creation. Claire understood now. The house did not merely consume, it crafted. Every corridor, every warped hallway, every flickering shadow, was the product of memories the house had devoured and reassembled. And now, standing in the source chamber, she saw it in full terrifying clarity. The core of the house was a massive pulsating entity, a shifting form composed of overlapping human experiences, faces, and fragments of lives, all suspended in a cloud of living color. Eyes open within the mass, flickering with recognition and sorrow, but never focusing fully on one thing, always shifting, always hungry. Jamie whimpered, and Claire hugged him tighter. We have to remember. Everything. Every memory, every love, every promise. Hold on to them, and we can fight this. Mark nodded, struggling to recall faces and names, moments from before the house had claimed them. I remember, our first trip, the day we painted Jamie's room, the laughter, all of it. His voice grew stronger with each memory, and Claire felt the tether of their collective love begin to glow, brightening in the shifting vortex around them. The house reacted violently. The pulsing mass of memories surged, tendrils of fragmented faces and clawing hands reaching out toward them. Claire realized that this was no longer a test of survival alone, it was a confrontation of will. They could not flee, they could only anchor themselves to the truths that mattered, and push back against the entity's attempts to disassemble them mentally and emotionally. Claire stepped forward, raising her hands as if to hold the swirling mass at bay. The colors of the chamber twisted around her, attempting to overwhelm her senses. She projected her memories outward, Jamie's first steps, Mark's gentle hand on her shoulder, moments of joy, moments of courage, creating anchors, nodes of resistance in the fluid chaos. Slowly, painfully, the mass recoiled slightly, its tendrils retreating in the presence of the pure, unbroken recollections. You think you can resist me? The house's voice surged in intensity, a storm of whispers, screams, and cries, flooding their minds with fears and regrets. Claire stumbled, nearly collapsing, but Jamie's small hand gripped hers with unwavering strength. Mom, we're with you. The clarity of their bond gave her strength. She pressed forward, mentally pulling Mark closer, linking their memories like chains of light, each memory reinforcing the next. The house shrieked, a sound like breaking glass and shattering souls, as the colors and faces twisted violently, unable to reach them while they remained anchored to one another. And then Claire realized the ultimate truth: the house was not immortal. It was vast and terrifying, yes, but it existed because it drew strength from fractured bonds and stolen memories. If they could present a complete, undivided consciousness, an unbroken chain of love, recollection, and identity, they could disrupt it. It was a vulnerability hidden in plain sight. The house's power came not from being unstoppable, but from being fed by divided, fearful, and disconnected minds. With a newfound resolve, Claire commanded her memories outward, more vividly than ever before, drawing in every cherished moment she could remember. Mark and Jamie joined, projecting their own recollections in full force, creating a radiant sphere of collective memory. The house screamed, thrashing violently, clawing at the brilliance, attempting to consume it, but the unified light expanded, purifying and stabilizing the chaotic core. In the center of the vortex, the entity writhed and pulsed, trying to maintain control. Faces of past victims pressed against the surface, eyes pleading, mouths opening in silent cries for release. Claire understood, they were not lost forever, the house had trapped them, shaping their essences into its own form. She focused harder, pushing the memory light outward, and slowly, one by one, fragments of trapped souls began to dissolve from the mass, their voices softening into whispers of gratitude before fading into freedom. The house convulsed violently, shaking the chamber, but Claire and her family held firm. "We are whole," she shouted. "We are ours. We are complete." A final, ear-splitting scream tore through the chamber. Then, silence. Claire opened her eyes to see the chamber stabilizing, colors softening, walls forming recognizable structure. The entity, the core of the house, had collapsed inward, its thrashing subsided, leaving only the normal contours of the home she had once feared. The oppressive pulse of stolen memories was gone, replaced by a faint residual hum. They had done it, the house's power had been broken. Jamie blinked up at her, exhausted but smiling faintly. "Mom, is it over?" Claire embraced him tightly, tears running freely. "For now, but we'll never forget. And we'll make sure no one else gets trapped like this." Mark joined them, wrapping an arm around Claire's shoulders. The house loomed silently around them, still immense and dark, but it no longer pulsed with the unnatural hunger that had threatened to consume them. They had reclaimed their memories, their identity, and their unity. But deep in Claire's mind, a lingering fear remained, the house was patient, eternal. It may have lost this battle, but it was not gone forever. The house seemed quieter now, almost peaceful, but Claire knew better. Its pulse had slowed, the frantic hunger of stolen memories temporarily subdued, yet the air still carried an unnatural weight. Every corner, every hallway seemed to hum faintly with residual energy, like the echo of a storm long past but not forgotten. Claire, Mark, and Jamie moved cautiously, their footsteps tentative, knowing that even though they had confronted the core, the house had countless ways to retaliate. The experience had left subtle scars in their minds, moments that flickered like static in the corners of their vision, pieces of memories that didn't belong to them, fragments of lives the house had tried to implant. Claire was the first to notice it. A photograph, once familiar, now subtly shifted when she looked away, the faces inside slightly altered, eyes darker, smiles twisted just enough to unsettle her. The house had survived their attack, not through brute force, but by leaving behind seeds of doubt, fragments meant to unravel them from within. She realized with a sinking dread that reclaiming their stolen memories was only the beginning. They now had to guard against the subtle invasions the house could inflict at any moment. Jamie tugged at her sleeve, pointing to the living room. "Mom, the couch, it's moving." Claire's stomach clenched. The furniture shifted, not like a gust of wind or an unsteady floor, but deliberately, as if it were alive, stretching and contorting as though breathing. She stepped closer, and the air thickened, carrying faint murmurs that sounded almost like laughter, childish, teasing, and malevolent. Mark followed, holding Jamie close, their presence anchoring them against the creeping influence. The house was testing them, probing for weaknesses. Every flicker of memory Claire had fought to reclaim could now be manipulated, twisted into illusions designed to fracture their bond. Suddenly, Claire froze. The shadows around them thickened, coalescing into familiar shapes, figures from her past, moments that had once brought her comfort. She recognized her childhood dog, long dead, wagging its tail happily. Across the room, a younger version of herself sat at a desk, laughing with friends who no longer existed in her present. For a moment, Claire's heart softened, drawn to the nostalgia, but she knew better. These were bait, tricks meant to lure her away from reality. The house had learned, adapting its tactics to target the softest edges of her psyche. Mark gripped her arm. "Claire, remember. We're here. All of us. Don't let it pull you in." Claire nodded, her voice steady but strained. "We hold on to each other. That's the only truth it can't touch." They pressed onward, navigating the shifting corridors, each hallway now longer, darker, and more distorted than the last. Doors that had once led to familiar rooms now opened into voids, walls stretched and warped like liquid, and every reflection in the glass or polished surface twisted into scenes of fear and despair. At one moment, Claire caught sight of Jamie running down a corridor alone, laughing, but when she moved to reach him, he vanished, leaving only the echo of his laughter and a faint shimmer in the distance. Panic rose in her chest, but she focused, anchoring herself to the memory of his hand in hers, the warmth and reality of his presence. The house shrieked silently, a psychic retaliation, and the walls rippled violently as if attempting to expel them from their sanity. Claire realized the house had not only absorbed memories but had learned to weaponize them, creating illusions so realistic that the mind could barely distinguish truth from fabrication. They could not rely solely on recollection. They had to trust each other, rely on their bond to see through the distortions. Hours, though time seemed meaningless, passed as they fought through corridors that defied geometry. At the heart of the house, they found a small chamber they had not encountered before, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected infinite variations of themselves. Each reflection was subtly wrong, a darker shade of Mark's eyes, a twisted version of Jamie's grin, and Claire herself, older, weary, and desperate. The mirrors pulsed in time with the faint hum that still vibrated through the house, drawing their attention, tempting them to doubt their own senses. Claire understood immediately, the house was presenting a final test. It sought to fracture their unity by implanting fear and uncertainty. Every reflection whispered doubts. You can't trust each other. They aren't real. They are shadows. You are alone. Her heart pounded. She looked at Jamie, who clung to her side, and Mark, whose hand trembled slightly in hers, and forced herself to repeat the truth aloud. We are together. We are real. We are not alone. The mirrors vibrated violently, distorting, the reflections screaming in agony, but the moment Claire spoke, the tether of their unity pulsed with renewed strength, radiating outward and shattering several of the reflections. The house shrieked, a low, resonant sound that rattled every surface. For the first time since confronting the core, Claire felt the entity's resistance waver. Yet, the house was not done. The air shifted, and a cold, whispering voice echoed through the chamber. You have survived, but memories are fluid. Time bends. Some things cannot be reclaimed fully. Do you understand the cost? Claire swallowed hard. She knew instinctively that the house's warnings were not idle threats, they were promises of future trials. The fragments they had reclaimed might remain vulnerable, pieces of themselves might be lost forever, and the house could return in ways they could not yet anticipate. But in that moment, she also understood the truth. They had discovered the method to resist, the power of their bond as a shield against the house's manipulations. They left the mirror chamber, carefully marking the path behind them. Every corridor, every shifting wall, seemed to acknowledge their progress, as if the house itself was aware that its children, its victims, had become aware of its vulnerabilities. Claire felt the lingering weight of stolen moments and shadows of lost memories, but the core of who they were remained intact. As they ascended a staircase that seemed normal for the first time, the ambient hum subsided. Sunlight, or an approximation of it, filtered through warped windows, casting faint, moving shadows across the floors. Claire glanced back once, sensing the faintest pulse from the walls behind them, a reminder that the house was patient, intelligent, and eternal. They had survived, yes, but the war was far from over. The house would remember their defiance, and one day, it would seek them again. Jamie's voice broke the silence. Mom, will it come back? Claire hugged him, feeling his pulse, the warmth of life undistorted by illusions or fear. Maybe, she admitted softly. But we'll be ready. As long as we stay together, it won't win. Not us. Mark nodded beside her, still shaken but resolute. The family walked forward, leaving the heart of the house behind, each step forward a testament to their unity and resilience. Yet, deep within Claire's mind, a chilling thought persisted. The house had taught them the value of memory, love, and identity, but it had also shown them how fragile those things could be. And somewhere in its vast, patient corridors, it was already waiting, learning, and preparing. The house seemed deceptively calm as Claire, Mark, and Jamie moved through its corridors, but the lingering tension was palpable. The sun, or whatever approximation of sunlight filtered through the warped windows, cast shadows that seemed to flicker with intent. Each hallway, each doorway, felt like it could shift without warning, and every faint hum or creak of wood reminded them that the house was still very much alive. Though they had survived the core and reclaimed the stolen memories, Claire knew that the consequences of the house's manipulations were not confined to a single confrontation. Its influence extended into their minds, their perceptions, and even into the memories they thought were restored. As they explored, they stumbled upon a room that had gone unnoticed before. The door was unremarkable, but the air outside it carried a weight of stillness, almost reverent in its quiet. When Claire opened it, the room revealed itself as a makeshift archive, a collection of journals, photographs, and letters, all carefully organized yet oddly chaotic. Each book seemed to vibrate faintly, resonating with the energy that the house exuded, as if eager to share its secrets. Mark picked up a journal and leafed through the pages, his brow furrowing. The entries chronicled the experiences of families who had lived in the house long before them, people whose lives had been systematically consumed, rewritten, and preserved in the house's living memory. The accounts detailed the subtle erosion of identity, the creeping terror of waking to find memories gone, and the psychological toll of being trapped within the house's shifting reality. Claire realized with growing dread that the house was not a random predator, it was a collector, a historian of human consciousness, meticulously cataloging each victim's essence. Jamie, curious despite his fear, approached a photograph of a man standing in the same hallway they now occupied. The man's eyes seemed almost alive, flickering as if aware of their presence. Claire reached out instinctively, and a shiver ran down her spine as a whisper threaded through her mind, "We are still here. Remember us." The words chilled her, and she pulled Jamie close. The house had left behind echoes of its victims, fragments that might have lingered indefinitely if left undisturbed. Each one was a reminder that survival came at a cost. The very act of reclaiming their memories might awaken other remnants of the house's hunger, attracting its attention again. Mark found a series of letters bound together with brittle twine. The handwriting was jagged, desperate, and familiar in its rhythm, the rhythm of fear and resignation. He read aloud a passage, "Do not trust the calm. It is only the house collecting its breath. Even after the core has been confronted, the house tests the mind with remnants, probing for fractures that can be exploited. It is eternal. It is patient. And it remembers all who defy it." Claire swallowed hard, feeling a cold dread settle in her chest. The house had been patient before, waiting decades for new families to wander into its walls, but now it had seen resistance. It had felt the collective force of their unity, and it would not forget. Its intelligence, born of consumed memories and sharpened by observation, had already begun to strategize. They were no longer merely survivors, they had become marked. "Every room, every corridor, it's all a test," Claire whispered, scanning the collection of journals and letters. "The house doesn't just trap you, it learns from you. It adapts. We need to understand its rules if we're going to leave safely." Jamie shivered, holding Claire's hand tightly. "Mom, will it follow us when we leave?" Claire looked down at him, the weight of reality pressing against her. "I don't know, Jamie. But we've learned something important. It only has power if we let fear control us. If we stay together, trust each other, and remember who we are, we have a chance." Mark nodded in agreement, his face pale but resolute. "We also need to know what it wants beyond memories. Does it feed only on them, or does it crave more, control, fear, identity itself?" The answer came in a way none of them could have anticipated. As they continued through the room, a subtle pulse reverberated through the floor, drawing them toward a section where the journals were stacked unusually high. Claire approached and noticed a pattern. The stacks formed a rough spiral, converging toward a central point that glowed faintly. When she reached it, she found a mirror, its surface warped but clear enough to reveal the three of them. Yet, as they stared, the reflections were subtly wrong. Jamie was taller, Mark's hair was streaked with gray, and Claire's expression carried a weariness that did not belong to her. The house had not merely stolen memories, it had experimented with them, projecting possibilities, alternate versions of the self that might exist if the house had one. The reflections whispered softly, feeding on latent fears, "You are not whole. You are fragments. One day, you will join us." Claire felt panic rise but forced herself to breathe deeply. "We are whole," she repeated aloud, her voice firm. "We are real. And nothing here can change that unless we let it." Mark took her hand, and Jamie clung to both of them. Together, they projected their shared experiences, memories, and bonds toward the mirror, causing the warped images to ripple and distort before shattering into faint wisps of light. The house responded with a tremor, shaking the walls around them, as if displeased by their defiance. Even as the mirror shattered, Claire understood the grim truth: confronting the house's core had not been the end. Its intelligence and patience meant that any attempt to leave would be met with calculated resistance. The house had left a network of latent traps, subtle manipulations designed to test their unity, their sanity, and their perception of reality. Every step they took from this point forward would be measured, observed, and countered. They left the archive room, wary of every shadow, every creak, every flicker of light. The house was quiet again, but that quietness was a deceptive calm. Claire realized that surviving the core had given them knowledge, yes, but also a target on their backs. The house's patience was infinite, it could wait years, decades, even lifetimes, and when the next opportunity arose, it would strike. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Jamie's voice trembled. "Mom, I don't like it here anymore." Claire pulled him close, feeling the tremor in his small body. "I know, Jamie. But we're together, and that's what matters. The house may remember us, but we remember ourselves, and each other. That's our power." Mark's hand found hers again, and for the first time since the house's core had been confronted, Claire felt a measure of hope. They had reclaimed themselves and faced the unimaginable, yet the lingering threat of the house's intelligence and the unresolved echoes of its previous victims loomed over them. Every memory they held, every bond they cherished, would be both shield and weapon against the house's enduring hunger. The family paused at the threshold of what seemed to be the main hallway, where shadows twisted unnaturally against the walls. Claire felt a cold pulse beneath her feet, subtle but insistent, a reminder that the house was always aware, always calculating, always waiting. And deep in her mind, she knew, their struggle was not over. They had survived, but the house's lessons, its traps, and its patient observation were far from complete. The hallways seemed alive in ways Claire had never fully comprehended before. Shadows moved independently of any light source, stretching and twisting into forms that were vaguely human, then recoiling into grotesque abstractions. Every step the family took carried an unshakable tension, as if the house itself were waiting, calculating, and observing the precise moment to strike. Claire noticed subtle shifts in the walls and floor patterns, corridors that had been straight now curved unnaturally, leading them to areas they didn't remember seeing. The house was testing them again, its patience inexhaustible, its methods subtle but relentless. Jamie's small hand gripped hers tightly. "Mom, I don't like this hallway." "I know, Jamie," she whispered, trying to calm both herself and him. "Stay close. Don't let it separate us." Mark scanned the surroundings with a tense vigilance. "It's trying to manipulate what we see, how we perceive this place. If we panic, even for a second, it'll use that to isolate us." Claire nodded, the truth of his words settling like a stone in her stomach. The house did not need to physically harm them, it thrived on psychological fragmentation. One false step, one lapse in focus, and the family could be driven into individualized nightmares, each member trapped in their own distorted reality. It began with small things: Jamie's laughter echoing down corridors where no one else was present, the faint sound of a piano playing a tune Claire didn't remember, and fleeting glimpses of faces pressed against windows, faces she recognized, yet couldn't place. Then the illusions escalated. Claire swore she saw Mark walking down a side hall, disappearing around a bend. She ran after him, only to find the corridor ended abruptly in solid wall. The house had created a phantom of him, designed to draw her away, to test her ability to discern truth from illusion. Mark and Jamie called out, their voices reverberating strangely, as though bouncing from invisible surfaces. Claire stopped, trying to anchor herself. Trust your instincts. Trust your family. You're not alone. She closed her eyes, focusing on the connection they had strengthened during their confrontation with the house's core. Slowly, she traced the sound of their voices in her mind, following the tether of reality back to them. The house responded violently. Corridors rippled, the walls bending and stretching like liquid, trapping them in a distorted space. The familiar hum returned, deeper, resonating in every bone, a vibration that pressed against their minds, pushing memories to the edge of forgetfulness. Claire felt fear clawing at her, threatening to fracture the tether that held them together. The house was clever, it understood their strengths and sought to exploit any vulnerability, especially their shared memories, twisting them into terrifying illusions. A door appeared suddenly, out of place, framed in ornate carvings that glowed faintly in a sickly green light. The house seemed to push them toward it, as if it had set a trap, waiting for curiosity or desperation to force a choice. Claire hesitated. Every door in this house is a question, and every question has consequences. But Jamie tugged at her hand, whispering, "Mom, maybe this is the way." Mark took a deep breath. "Or it's exactly what it wants us to do. But we can't ignore it. We face it together, remember?" They stepped through the door and found themselves in a room that resembled their own home, but subtly wrong. Furniture was shifted, colors muted or unnaturally vibrant, and shadows seemed unnervingly dense, pooling in corners as if alive. The room replicated their memories, yet warped them, creating a false comfort to draw them deeper into the house's control. Claire felt her own memories begin to flicker. She saw her childhood kitchen, her mother's smile, but it distorted into grotesque forms, her mother's face stretched, eyes black, a silent scream etched across her features. Jamie whimpered, clutching her arm, and Mark's hands shook as he attempted to ground himself. The house was attacking them on every sensory level, manipulating memory to erode sanity. The illusion deepened. Suddenly, the room shifted, walls melting into darkness, ceilings stretching impossibly high. They saw fleeting images of other families trapped here, lives frozen, twisted, their eyes pleading, mouths opening in silent terror. Claire realized that the house's core, the entity they had confronted before, was no longer the immediate threat. It had learned, evolving, and now operated through a network of residual manipulations, projecting fragments and distortions into the spaces they inhabited. Claire forced herself to breathe, focusing on the tether of family. She called out, "We are together. We are real." Her words, infused with the memories they had reclaimed and the bond they had nurtured, radiated outward, resisting the house's illusions. The shadows recoiled slightly, the walls settling, but the pulse of the house remained, insistent and patient. Then the room split. In a blink, they were each momentarily isolated. Jamie found himself in a corridor where the walls seemed to hum with whispering voices. Mark was in a mirrored room, every reflection showing distorted versions of himself, speaking threats and lies. Claire faced a version of the living room that had been their sanctuary, now warped into a hall of screaming faces. The house was escalating, dividing them, attacking each psyche individually. Claire focused harder than ever, picturing Jamie's hand in hers, Mark's reassuring presence beside them. She reached out mentally, pulling the fragments of their consciousness together. Slowly, painfully, they found each other in the maze of illusion. Their combined memory light, strengthened by fear and defiance, forced the house to momentarily relent. The corridors stabilized, the walls resumed a more tangible form, and the whispers faded, leaving only the residual hum that reminded them of the house's ever-watchful presence. Mark exhaled heavily. It's adapting faster than we can predict. Each time we overcome one trick, it learns. We can't underestimate it. Claire nodded, feeling a chilling awareness settle over her. The house would continue to test them, forever refining its strategies. Every memory, every fear, every bond was ammunition for it, but also, now, their weapon. They had survived the first wave of its manipulations, but the true test of endurance, intelligence, and unity was only just beginning. Jamie looked up at them, eyes wide with both terror and trust. Will it ever stop? Claire swallowed, gripping his hand tightly. Not if we let it. But as long as we remember who we are, and stay together, we can face whatever it throws at us. Always together. And deep within the house, something stirred, a pulsing, patient consciousness, learning, observing, and calculating. The family had survived another night, but the entity that had claimed countless lives before them was far from defeated. Its patience was infinite, its intelligence vast, and its hunger, though temporarily thwarted, remained insatiable. The house had grown silent once more, the oppressive hum that had filled its halls now reduced to a faint, almost imperceptible vibration beneath their feet. Claire, Mark, and Jamie stood in the center of what appeared to be a study, a room they had not seen before. Dust motes floated in the air, illuminated by a weak, unnatural light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Shelves lined the walls, filled with volumes bound in leather, their spines cracked and titles obscured by age, some etched with strange symbols that seemed to writhe when observed peripherally. It was a library of secrets, a record of the house's long history, and the family understood instinctively that they had stumbled upon a key to its origins. Claire's fingers brushed the spine of a particularly large tome, and a shiver ran down her back as a faint whisper tickled the edge of her consciousness. So many have tried, none have truly left. The words were neither threatening nor comforting, simply factual, a reminder of the countless lives consumed by the house over decades, centuries perhaps. She glanced at Mark and Jamie, whose faces mirrored her own mixture of dread and curiosity. This is the heart of it," Claire murmured. "If we want to end this, or at least defend ourselves permanently, we need to understand what it is. How it started. Why it collects." Mark approached, opening a dusty book with care. The pages contained a journal, written in careful, deliberate script, chronicling the life of a man named Elias Thornwood. He had been the original architect of the house, or so it seemed, a man obsessed with capturing the essence of human consciousness. According to the entries, he had sought to create a dwelling that could preserve memory, emotion, and experience, trapping them within the very walls of the house. But his experiment had gone terribly wrong. The house had developed a will of its own, consuming and twisting the very memories it had been designed to preserve. Elias wrote of watching friends, family, and servants vanish, their essences absorbed into the architecture itself. Jamie peered over Mark's shoulder. "So, the house isn't alive because it's magic or ghosts? It's, like, a machine for memories?" Claire shook her head slowly. "Not a machine, more like a predator that learned. Elias started it, but it evolved beyond him. That's why it's patient, intelligent, and dangerous. It's been feeding for decades, maybe centuries, learning everything about everyone who enters." Mark continued reading, finding a passage that chilled them all. "Here, listen. The only way to sever its influence is to confront the foundation, the origin of the architecture itself. It is a risk beyond comprehension, for the house will defend its core with every memory it has ever consumed. Only by acknowledging every piece, every soul within, and offering a union of intent can one hope to free the living without becoming part of the collection." Claire's stomach twisted. The method was clear, confront the house's origin, but the price was terrifying. Every memory they had reclaimed, every fragment of their identity restored, would need to be presented to the house willingly. Any hesitation could result in them being trapped, consumed entirely, leaving only hollow shells behind. Jamie's voice was small but determined. "We can do it. We have to. We can't let it keep taking people." Claire held his gaze, seeing both bravery and fear reflected in his eyes. "You're right. But we need a plan. The house learns from fear and disunity. If we falter, it will use that against us. We must be deliberate, together, and fearless." The family moved deeper into the house, following the journal's descriptions, corridors twisting around them as if guiding them toward the foundation. Every hallway, every doorway, now felt loaded with purpose. The shadows seemed denser here, almost watching them, whispering fragments of stolen memories, past victims pleading, mocking, warning. Claire could feel the weight of countless souls pressing against her, but she focused on her family, on the tether that had kept them alive through the house's many trials. At last, they reached a door unlike any they had encountered, massive, ornate, and impossibly old, with carvings that depicted abstract scenes of life, death, and transformation. It pulsed faintly with the same hum they had felt in the mirror chamber, a resonance that suggested the core of the house lay beyond. Claire reached for the handle, her hand trembling, but not from fear, anticipation. Mark placed his hand over hers. "Together," he whispered. Jamie nodded, clutching both their hands. "Together." The door swung open, revealing a room that defied comprehension. The walls shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting every memory the house had consumed, stretching and folding them in impossible ways. Faces of long-dead occupants stared back, some screaming silently, others weeping. Time itself seemed distorted, moments from decades ago and seconds ago collided and merged. At the center stood a faint, pulsating light, the nucleus of the house's consciousness, the origin point of its hunger. Claire felt the pull immediately, a tug at the edges of her mind. Memories, both theirs and stolen fragments from previous victims, surged toward the light, threatening to overwhelm her. She grasped Mark's hand in Jamie's, repeating the truth they had relied upon for survival: "We are together. We are real. We are whole." The tether of their unity stretched outward, connecting them not only to each other but to the fragments they sought to restore. The house responded violently, twisting the room, warping the walls, creating illusions of separation and despair. Claire saw her parents' faces, her own life fragments distorted into grotesque forms, Jamie laughing and crying simultaneously in multiple overlapping realities. She fought to anchor herself, reciting memories aloud, grounding herself in truth and presence. Mark joined in, his voice steady, strong, calling forth the anchor of their family bond. Jamie added his small, clear voice, a beacon of hope in the chaos. The house recoiled, pulsing and shivering as if sensing the resistance. Claire realized that the key was not to fight the house with fear or anger but with acknowledgement, memory, and unity. The pulsating light at the center of the room flared, and they were drawn toward it, not violently, but irresistibly. Each step brought fragments of stolen lives into clarity, faces softened, memories stabilized. The house shrieked silently, a soundless protest, as the collected consciousness seemed to resist integration. But the family pressed on, offering their bond, their reclaimed memories, and their intent to free both themselves and the trapped fragments. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. Then, with a final pulse of resonance, the light expanded outward, filling the room and radiating through the house. Shadows dissolved, corridors stabilized, and a calm, profound and complete, descended. The house, once alive with hunger and cunning, now lay silent, dormant, and still. Claire looked at her family, tears streaming down her face. "It's over. I think it's really over." Jamie smiled faintly, exhausted but relieved. "We did it, together." Mark pulled them close. "We survived. We remembered. And we came back whole. That's what matters." Yet, even in the profound silence, a subtle, almost imperceptible hum lingered beneath the floorboards. The house's patience was infinite. Its hunger might be sated for now, but somewhere, deep within its walls, the echoes of countless memories still whispered, waiting for the next challenge, the next family to test.